Many people ask this question about spiritual seeking, that why did I even start seeking? And the implication is that my life was much better before I was a seeker. And something happened, an awakening happened, and this seeker identification came into being. And that identification was in search of something. It was in search of the perfect wholeness, the perfect bliss, the permanent state. And the search of it made the seeker miserable. And now the question is that while the seeker is on this journey, they experience great confusion, a lot of conflict, a lot of pain and suffering, which is also described as the dark night of the soul in the classic spiritual literature. However, they can't help it. So what does one do? When will this suffering end? The suffering of the seeker. So I think I will read Ramesh's words on this because he has explained it beautifully. So Ramesh says, the whole point is that any question is asked by the ego. Why does the ego ask the question? Because the ego wants to achieve enlightenment. Why does the ego ask the question? Because the ego is the seeker. So seeking is happening through a particular ego. And the ego, through whom the seeking is happening, didn't choose to do it. If he knew what misery the seeking is, he would have chosen not to seek. So the seeking is something that is happening, and you have not chosen to seek. That is the basis of what I am saying. Point here being, none of us asked for awakening or insight or spiritual understanding, whatever you want to call it. None of us asked for this seeker identification to arise and start seeking truth. So it happened on its own. The seeking happened. The seeker identification came into being in search of enlightenment as a perfect state, as an end to all of my problems, as an end to my suffering in relationship, my suffering in work, my suffering with my relatives, my spouse, my parents, my children, whatever you want to, whichever way you want to imagine suffering, the suffering is there. So my existence basically is suffering, and I want a solution for that. That is the ego. And ego says that once I have the enlightenment, then I will be free. Then the seeking will end. However, that is not the case according to this concept. So I will further read Ramesh's word to make this clear as to how the spiritual seeking will end. The 1 in 1,000 that Lord Krishna is speaking of, now he is referring to a verse from Bhagavad Gita. That one didn't choose to be the seeker, the seeking happened. But instead of letting it happen, letting that power which started the seeking carry on the seeking, the ego who thinks he or she is the seeker wants to know the best way to achieve enlightenment. Now, we have conceptualized a perfect state, a solution to all our problems, and we call it enlightenment. We do not know of it because we haven't experienced it. We've just heard about it from others. But it has become so ingrained in our psyche that once I achieve enlightenment, once I achieve the permanent state of bliss, then I remain in it forever and nothing deters me in life. So this is the nature of seeker. It is trying to find that truth which is permanent. Ironically, in a place that's whose nature is impermanence. Ramesh further says, why do you want enlightenment? Because you are expecting it to give you the greatest pleasure this world has given you. So I always say that the seeking begins with an illusory seeker seeking enlightenment as an object which would give him great pleasure. Have you ever thought about it? What is this whole movement towards enlightenment? We are chasing something that we do not know of, but we've just heard about it. We could have heard about it in the scriptures or from gurus or anywhere for that matter. And the idea is that it is going to bring about an end to my suffering through some great profound realization. It will immerse me in a perfect state, something like samadhi, where all my thoughts will disappear and I will remain permanently in that state of bliss. However, we know from our own experience that no state is permanent. Everything is fleeting. Every pleasure is fleeting. And Nisargadatta Maharaj says that the background of every pleasure is pain. Because pleasure breeds repetition and craving of the same pleasure again and again, which is pain. It can come in different forms. Wanting money, sexual pleasure, or any kind of wanting, deep wanting to become whole, to become full, complete. It begins with the assumption that I am right now incomplete. So, seeker by nature is incompleteness. And that illusory seeker, because why do we say seeker is an illusion? Because seeker again itself is a changing entity. The illusory seeker is seeking something which is also an illusion. The seeker does not know what you're seeking. We do not know what we really want. We say we want happiness. We say we want peace. We say we want money, we want good relationship, we want a stable life. But is life stable? Has life been stable for you up to this point? Have relationships been permanent for you up to this point? No. So what is that seeker craves for in the end, which it calls enlightenment, that it thinks, he or she thinks, is going to give something that is going to make the seeker whole, complete. What is that you have not ever experienced before that you are going to get through enlightenment? If you're looking for sensory pleasures, your mind can give you the best sensory, sensual pleasures that you desire in life. But every pleasure has a background of pain, as we know it, because pleasure breeds repetition of the craving for more pleasure. So what is Ramesh trying to say here? So in the end, he gives it in his last statement. He says, The seeking ends only with the total realization, unquestioned, unconditional realization that there never was a seeker. That's where it ends. When it is realized not by the seeker, but an impersonal realization, a deep realization, a realization that is not questioned, but it is known in the being. It is pure knowing that there never was a seeker. The whole movement of the seeker was an illusion. The seeker, the seeking, and the sought are one movement. The seeker is the seeking, and the seeking is the sought. This separation between seeker trying to seek something outside of itself perpetuates separation, suffering. Because it begins with the assumption that I am incomplete. That which is incomplete cannot realize that which is complete. Because complete means complete, it is not composed of parts. The word Advait means not two. It does not mean that the illusion is made up of parts, that the whole is made up of parts. It simply means that the multiplicity, the parts, the being in parts is an illusion. When this is recognized, it is seen that there never was any seeker seeking anything. And that is when the seeking drops. I think I'm just going to read one more line to bring more clarity. So, when does it really end? It ends with the realization, what am I doing? What am I seeking? I didn't choose to do any seeking. Will the seeking end in the mind-body organism? Who cares? So when who cares arises from the depths of your being, I don't really care a damn whether enlightenment happens or not. It's not my business. I'm not the seeker. Then enlightenment is very, very close indeed. So dissolution of the seeker energy is enlightenment happening. Otherwise, there is no such thing as personal enlightenment. There is no such thing as seeker becoming a better seeker or an advanced seeker. The seeker energy is an illusion. The recognition of this fact itself brings about enlightenment, which Ramesh speaks about. So when there is no seeker, what happens? What remains is the biological organism, the mind-body organism, a creation of nature, which is inherently peaceful. It acts and reacts according to whatever conditioning it has received up till now, up to this point. The conditioning changes as per God's will or cosmic law, and so does the nature of the organism also changes according to the same law. But there is no individual, there is no separate self, there is no ego that is in charge of anything. So when there is no ego, there is no question of anybody doing anything. So the true nature is being, where this realization happens. So being does not live in time. The existence The pure existence itself is this being, is this light of pure consciousness, where all these frames of movement, of multiplicity are illuminated. But the screen of being is reality. The images may change. Nothing happens to the screen of being. So, this is the whole idea. Till there is a seeker seeking something, the suffering will happen. But when the seeking dissolves, the seeker dissolves. And then there is just the pure being. And in manifestation, that comes across to us as the mind-body organisms, different mind-body organisms living their respective destinies, operating according to the cosmic law or God's will, as they have been programmed through two factors, either genetics, not either, two factors, genetics and the conditioning they have received from their surroundings, parents, schooling, culture, geography, whatever it is. The beliefs keep changing, the person keeps changing, the basic nature may not change, but the ideas may keep changing. The person may feel they are making progress, they're becoming better. Sometimes they may feel they're becoming better, sometimes they may feel they're becoming, they've lost it and they are, they go through this confusion, which Ramesh would call flip-flop or dark night of the soul, where there is this intense confusion because the seeker doesn't even understand what they're seeking. They don't even know what they're seeking. There's just a very strong movement. And that movement also is governed by the cosmic law. So that means it is destiny of the illusory seeker to seek. And till it is destined for that seeker to be in that seeking mode, the seeking will happen. Nothing can be done about it. But with this realization that the reality is not the seeker and what he or she is seeking, but the deep knowing or being which is here and now, then this whole movement drops and one rests in this bliss of stillness, of peace, which means everything happens as before. Life continues with its flow, but there is a complete acceptance of the uncertainty that it brings with it. Because at the core there is this knowing, deep knowing, there is no seeker, there is nothing to attain. The self that we are trying to realize, that alone is. There is no small self. There is only the eternal self that is pretending to be the small self in this illusion we call life and trying to achieve wholeness, completeness as the eternal self. So in the end, in the final phase of the dark night of the soul, the seeker says, if I am not seeking, then who am I? Then what is all this seeking about? That is when the seeking comes to end, when the seeker realizes this and says, who cares now? It's not about verbalizing this. It's not about announcing to others that I don't care about seeking anymore. That is also something I've heard many times. And when we say that, we're usually trying to cover up something. It's a projection. It has to be a deep knowing in the being. And that is why Ramesh here says, who cares? So when the who cares arises from the depths of your being, that means it's not being verbalized. It's not being presented as an intellectual idea, but it is realized in the depth of the being. That is when true enlightenment happens.